and this will be available to you guys. But spend a few minutes kind of introducing and talking about the program as people dial in. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, my name is Brian Gladden. I am one of the entrepreneurs in residence for the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at Sacramento State University. And we are really the hub for innovation and entrepreneurship in this region, trying to really elevate not just the student population, but everybody in the region for economic growth. We're a little unique. Most institutions who a lot of you might be familiar with, higher ed, whether you're Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, other state schools around the country, mostly focus on the student population, and we do not. We have about 75% of the people that are attending here, all of you, are non-students. Only about 25% are students. So we're really unique. And as of last year, we had more programs in Global Entrepreneurship Week than any institution in the United States. So we do a lot of stuff. And as you can see, we have amazing speakers like Tony and others. If you've been with us, and I see some familiar faces over the past 3 months since we've had this year's innovation series I created. We had Ash Moria, we had Tendai Viki from Strategizer, we had Sharon Tall from Where to Play, we had Ben Lamort from OKRs.com, we've got Tony here in a second from Strategyn. So we have some global thought leaders that are coming here to talk, and luckily I coach with them or use a lot of their concepts in my teachings, and we're trying to elevate all of the the tide for all the boats here in the region and around the world, which is why many of you are dialing in. So we're really excited to have Tony with us. Just in case you haven't been with us before and you joined because of Tony today, we hope you come back. And in the link, you'll see that Arlene has put in a link for the rest of you to join the rest of the innovation series. And I'm going to share my screen and show you what that looks like. Give me a second. All right, so in case you are not aware of it, we have quite a few sessions still to go, and we also have a lot of these recorded. So if you've missed the ones before, I did Blue Ocean. We had been with OKRs again. We had David Bland 2 weeks ago do testing business ideas when the Strategizer partners, and also I said Sharon Tall. In our next session after Tony, we actually have several more coming up. I'm doing culture next week, so everything from the culture design canvas and using also some Strategizer culture maps to we have social innovation with Jonathan Kaufman on the 3rd if you're a social impact venture entity. And then in October 10th, we have Dan Toma, the innovation accounting, also co-wrote the book with Tendai Viki on corporate startup. So he'll be here on the 10th. And then we have some capital, talking about how to capital strategy with Bob on October 11th. And then our own Josh David Miller here in Sacramento, a 2-part series on customer discovery, which is perfect for Tony. A lot of stuff on interview techniques, design thinking. So it's a great augment. And we'll have a few more as well. So without further ado, I wanted to get into today. Piggybacking our innovation series, not just for entrepreneurs, but corporate innovation as well. So many of you might be intrapreneurs who are here versus just entrepreneurs, and we welcome you. And I wanted to welcome Tony as we get into understanding your customers better, right? Learning how to apply jobs to be done. And I'm really excited that Tony's here with us before I introduce him, because I use jobs to be done every day. And when I talk to CEO groups like Vistage or Renaissance CFOs, or I do corporate innovation, IBM, HPs, or I do small startup innovation, right, through Lean Stack or my own with a single founder. We talk about jobs to be done, and both Strategizer, Lean Stack, other of the leading frameworks, and you can see with Tony's book, Alex Osterwalder, the founder of Strategizer, wrote the foreword. I coach with Alex as well as Ash from Lean Stack. Jobs to be done is a concept that cuts through all of them, because it is the way to think about your customers and not their problems. We love the mantra, love the problem, but really when you get into it, it's really about the job the customer wants to get done. And so I know many of you are here to hear about Tony. He is the founder of Strategyn, many years at IBM as well as a market planner. And in the last 32 years, he's really been running Strategyn and creating the ODI framework, which you'll hear about, outcome-driven innovation process. So he's an innovator, many patents around innovation and customer needs, and obviously the author of Jobs to be Done, Theory to Practice, as well as What Customers Want. A lecturer, guest speaker all over the world. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tony Ulwick, and very happy he's with us. And you'll get the recording and slides. I'll come back at the end and you will have a chance for Q&A, and I will moderate the door and let Tony take it from here.
Brian, thanks so much. I certainly appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully the audience will find this time well spent. So let me just jump right in. I'll give you a little bit of my background. I started at IBM back in the 1980s. I worked there from 81 till 91. And the first product I worked on was the IBM PC Junior, which was supposed to take over the world. It was going to replace Apple as the leading home computer maker. And it didn't happen. And not only did it not happen, the day after the product was introduced, the headlines in the Wall Street Journal read, "The PC Junior is a flop." And it was. And it took us a year to recognize it. And of course, I couldn't believe it. You know, a company such as IBM with all its vast resources, how could they fail with such an important initiative? Well, I learned pretty quickly that it's not just IBM that fails at innovation, it's all companies. And it's not just back then, it's still happening today. So I've spent my career trying to think through a better way to innovate so we mitigate the risk of failure. And that's what I want to share with you. So we know that companies all invest in innovation. It's on every CEO's top 10 list as one of their key initiatives. But there's always issues. They sound something like this, and you can pick the ones that apply in your situation. But they struggle to identify and prioritize the customer's most unmet needs. And this is often the top reason why products fail based on many studies that have been done. Or you have hundreds of ideas, but not sure which ones to pursue. So you get bogged down in this, ideas first approach. You end up making many costly mistakes. In big companies, you may struggle with turf wars, politics, lack of alignment. You just can't get the teams going in the same direction, never mind the right direction. And experience disappointing innovation success rates that tend to be low, usually under the 20% rate. So when I wanted to be clear here too, when I'm talking about the innovation process, I'm talking about everything in front of the development process. Some people call this the front end of innovation, or the fuzzy front end of innovation, but really it's everything that happens before development. And the whole idea of the innovation process is you're supposed to come up with a solution that you feel very comfortable will address the needs of the market before you start developing it. All right. So the output of the innovation process should be a winning concept, and you should know it's a winning concept and be able to prove it's a winning concept before you invest in its development. That's the thought process. Okay. Now, easier said than done, right? So let's talk about why companies struggle with innovation. At a high level, this always sounds like a fairly simple business process. We're just trying to come up with solutions that address unmet needs. And that means you have product teams that are trying to figure out what solutions address those unmet needs in the markets they choose to pursue. There's only two inputs. We have solutions and we have needs. We just got to match them up, right? So that the best solutions will address those top unmet needs. But what we find as companies pursue this process is that there's a disagreement on many of the basics, the fundamentals of innovation. First off, 71% of product teams don't agree on the best way to define markets. Should they define them around products, technologies, verticals, geographies, or something else? What we find, which I find remarkable, 80% of product teams don't agree on what a customer need even is. Is it an exciter, a delighter, a requirement, a specification, a value driver, a latent need? We could go on, right? Or something else. 85% of product teams don't agree on how to best prioritize unmet needs. And they end up prioritizing feature sets in many cases. We find that 76% of product teams don't agree on how to best segment markets. Should it be around demographics, psychographics, attitudes, behaviors, a combination, or something else? So, of course, if companies and product teams can't agree on these fundamentals, it's going to be really hard to come up with solutions that address unmet customer needs. And what we often see is that companies piece together or cobble together incompatible innovation methods that are grounded in different paradigms, which causes confusion and failure. Mixing a lot of different processes together doesn't make a better process necessarily, right? It doesn't make things work better. It could make things a lot worse. And I've seen this since the very beginning days of my career. Just like I said, cobbling things that are grounded in solution space with things that are grounded in jobs to be done space often ruins the process, not enhances it. So to be great at innovation or any business process, you need a great process, whether it's a marketing lead generation process, your accounting process, your innovation process. What we mean by a great innovation process is one that provides teams with a unifying language for innovation. So everyone agrees what a market is, what a need is, what the unmet needs are, what the segments look like, and how they're defined. A process that actually works, one that has an 86% success rate instead of an 86% failure rate. A process that aligns teams so everyone's rowing in the same direction, and not only the same direction, but the right direction to create value for customers in building a customer-centric organization. And most importantly, a process that enables you to conceptualize solutions that you know with a high degree of confidence will win in the market before you put it into development, right? This is the key. Now, this sounds like this would be impossible to do. Let me show a few examples of how it was done. We've worked with the Bosch team to help them enter the North American circular saw market. They had to compete against DeWalt and Makita, get shelf space in places like Lowe's and Home Depot. And they came up with a concept they knew would win in the marketplace. They knew it would win because it had this set of features. How did they know it was the right set of features? Well, it addressed this set of outcomes or unmet needs, such as minimize the likelihood that debris is thrown up into the user's face, or minimize the likelihood of inadvertently moving off the cut path, or minimize the time it takes to make blade angle adjustments. Well, how did they know those were the most unmet needs? Well, they discovered a segment of the population that said that those needs were very important to them and not satisfied with the existing solutions put out there by DeWalt and Makita. And how do we know that? Well, we studied the entire job the customer was trying to get done, looked at all the outcomes that they were trying to achieve, and discovered those needs that had to be addressed. In this case, they got the job done significantly better than the existing solutions, which allowed them to win in the marketplace. And again, they knew all this before they started developing the product. As did Kroll OnTrack, who was trying to enter the electronic evidence discovery business. And they had failed on their first two attempts, and then they had tried this approach, and it came up with a concept that they felt highly confident would win in the market. Again, it had this set of features that were tied to this set of unmet needs, that were tied to research that pointed out those needs after studying the entire job the customer's trying to get done. Again, creating a solution they knew would get the job done significantly better before they started developing the product. So we've given you a hardware example, a service example. Let me give you a software example as well. Cox Automotive, this was their Conquest product. They aligned their product team around a solution they knew would win. Again, with the feature set that was tied to a very specific set of instructions that come from customers to help them get the job done better, that were identified through research to be highly important and poorly satisfied in the population after studying the entire job that the customer is trying to get done. Again, all this happens before development begins. This is the foundation behind the outcome-driven innovation process. So what I want to do today is to take you through from beginning to end how this works, and why it works, and the importance of adopting a different mindset when you approach innovation from a scientific perspective as opposed to a guesswork or random perspective. The key about outcome-driven innovation outcome-driven innovation is designed through a problem lens rather than a solution lens. In other words, you've all seen this quote before, right? People don't want the quarter-inch drill, they want the quarter-inch hole, right? So this gives us an option. Instead of looking at the world of innovation through the lens of what the company is doing, in other words, instead of looking through the world of innovation through the lens of the drill maker, let's look at the world of innovation through the lens of the hole maker. And when you do that, everything starts to look a little bit different. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that this perspective allows you to see and define markets differently, needs differently, segments differently, and we're going to apply that principle as we go through this. The first thing you notice is why people buy products to begin with, which is to get a job done. Now, a job can be a task that people are trying to accomplish, a goal or objective they're trying to achieve, a problem they're trying to resolve, something they're trying to avoid, really anything that a group of people are trying to get done. Now, the products that win in the marketplace get the job done significantly better. And I've said that a few times, but let me put some numbers to that as well. We find, and you can think about this yourselves, when you switch from one product to another, if it promised to get the job done 1% better, how about 2% better, 5% better, 10% better? What we've learned is that when you cross the 15% threshold, that's when customers will try your product. They're not going to switch for the promise of an incremental improvement, usually, right? If you want to win at innovation, you have to be able to prove to yourself that you're getting the job done 15% better or more than competing solutions out there in the marketplace. And this approach that we'll show you here allows you to do exactly that. Again, outcome-driven innovation starts with defining a market. Again, not around a product or technology, but around the job to be done. We're going to define customer needs, not as exciters and delighters, but as the metrics people use to measure success when getting that job done. And when we talk about unmet needs, we're going to talk about quantifying what's important and unsatisfied in the market of choice. And when we talk about segmentation, we're not going to segment around demographics and psychographics. We're going to segment around unmet needs. All this sounds like marketing 101, and it really is, but it's all executed through the lens of the hole maker, not the drill maker. And what this allows you to do is to put together your winning strategy. So we're going to take you through each of these. And the reason you want to know this and learn this is because it will improve your chances of success quite dramatically. We're putting the odds in your favor of winning. So instead of coming up with a solution and hoping it addresses the top 15 unmet needs in a market without knowing what those 15 unmet needs are, we're going to flip it around and say, now that we know what the top 15 unmet needs are, let's create a solution that is certain to address each of those needs. We've applied this over 30 years, nearly every industry, over 1,000 different growth strategies and engagements with some of the world's largest companies, well vetted. That's really the point of this slide. You don't have to reinvent this process. You don't have to add to it. You don't have to subtract from it. Using it as is will really help guide your success at innovation. So how does it work? Let's start with market definition. So I said we're going to define the market around the job to be done. So let's take a look at this, the old lens, right? If you look at markets through the lens of the drill maker, you'd say you're in the drill market, right? But we'd want to define markets around products or technologies or verticals or demographics. Since people buy products to get a job done, why don't we just define a market as a group of people and the job they're trying to get done? That would make sense, right? So let's approach it that way and see what this looks like. Like an interventional cardiologist, for example, they use an angioplasty balloon, but why? They're trying to restore blood flow in an artery. Are they in the angioplasty balloon market? No, they're in the market to restore blood flow in an artery. right? We have cybersecurity managers who are trying to protect a website from cyber threats. We have tradesmen who are trying to cut a piece of wood in a straight line. We have legal teams, like with Kroll OnTrack, trying to discover information that supports or refutes a case. Are they in the electronic evidence discovery market? No, they're in the market to discover information that supports or refutes a case. Right? We have general neurologists trying to diagnose patients with neurological condition. We have parents trying to pass on life lessons to children. Right? Now, notice each of these is constructed in a very specific way. They all start with a verb, have an object of the verb, and a contextual clarifier. And what we're trying to do here is to define a market around what the customer is trying to execute. There's always an action. That's why we start with the verb, and quickly followed by the object of the verb and the contextual clarifier, which is optional because you could pass on life lessons to anyone if you want to define your market that way. But if you want to be a bit more specific and constrain it, you could say pass on life lessons to children. Now, what this allows you to do too, it takes you into a place where you can start breaking down the job into job steps and analyze it and understand exactly what people are trying to get done along each step of the way. So it's very important to define it in this manner, and then the rest of the process will flow quite nicely. The very next step is to do exactly as I said, break down that job into job steps. We call this a job map. Now, this is not a process map. It's not a customer journey map. It's not a customer experience map. It's not describing what the customer is doing. It's describing what the customer is trying to do. Now, that may sound like a little nuance, but it makes a huge difference. If you went out to study what the customer's doing, the customer may be getting a job done with 50 different products. So you'd be plotting out what they're doing, and you have 50 different slides showing what those 50 different people are doing. But you're only going to have one slide that describes what they're trying to do, because they're all trying to do the same thing. They're just going about it in 50 different ways. This dramatically reduces the complexity of understanding a market, right? Again, let's not study what they're doing. Let's not observe them and just write down what they're doing. Let's talk to them to figure out what are they trying to do as they go through the process. Okay. What this allows you to do is to establish a stable focal point for value creation, because these statements and the job itself are stable over a long period of time. Products come and go, but when your product goes away, it doesn't mean your market went away. It means some better solution came along that got the job done better. So let's stay focused on what the customer is trying to accomplish, and that's always our North Star. We worked with Steve Blank a couple of years ago, November 4th approaching, and you can go look at this article and read it as well. But one criticism of the lean startup methodology was that it didn't have a market definition phase. People were asked to conceptualize and to hypothesize the market, the product, and the customer's needs all at the same time. And what we're doing here is something quite different. We're asking you to look at one at a time. Let's define the market first. And then once we know the market, let's define the needs associated with that market. And once we know which needs are unmet, let's define the solution that addresses those unmet needs. So this gets rid of a lot of the pivoting, the iteration that takes place when you hypothesize all three of these things up front. So we're trying to turn this more into a scientific approach to innovation. This allows us to then uncover the customer's needs. Now we're going to talk about needs in a very specific way. I've always found this so interesting over the years. What is a customer need? Is it an idea, a solution, an exciter, a delighter? Is it a benefit, a must-have, an attribute, a value driver, a requirement, a problem, a gain, a latent need, a characteristic? Is it a goal? Is it a feature? Is it a wish? The funny thing, I didn't make these up. I've heard people talk about needs in all these different ways over the years and more. But just like any process, if you have a bad input, you're not going to get a great output. So we have to be very precise on what we call a need and what a need is. A need, as we know it, is a statement that comes from a customer that's going to deliver some important information to the innovator. What should that statement contain? Right? It should contain information that's going to help the innovator, help the customer get the job done better, right? So when we think about this, we say, what characteristics must the perfect needs statement possess? Well, first off, it's got to be useful across all business disciplines. Marketing can't have their view of customer needs and have it different than the development team or the R&D team. They have to be knowable and discoverable. We can't walk around thinking that customers have latent needs and can't articulate their needs. So why talk to customers because they don't know what they want? That is all myth and fallacy. They don't know what solutions they want, but solutions aren't needs. So don't talk to customers about what solutions they want. These statements have to be solution independent, right? Again, we're trying to come up with solutions that address unmet needs. They can't talk about the solution. They got to be stable over time, which is something I learned back in the IBM days as well. It's not as if we didn't go talk to customers. We did. A year and a half later, we announced what they said they wanted, and they said that's not what we want. So it's as if we're hitting a moving target. We have to eliminate that possibility. These statements have to be actionable. They have to be unambiguous so we can agree on what they mean. They have to be valid across all geographies. In essence, they have to describe the metrics that people are going to use to judge the value of your product. Okay, so we've put a lot of pressure on these statements, right? These words have to communicate a lot to the innovator. So we're going to define needs a little different. They're not solutions, benefits, requirements, gains, pains, exciters, delighters, blah, blah. They're not any of those things. What they are the measurable outcomes that people want to achieve when getting a job done. I like thinking about it like this. You have the job they're trying to get done at the high tier level. Then you have your job map to take you through the steps. And under each step, people can tell you what they're trying to achieve, what they're trying to avoid, and how they're trying to get the job done better. Right? By better, we mean faster, more predictably, and with a better result. Okay? That's how you execute any process better along those three dimensions. That's why there's statistical process control to remove variation. That's why there's Six Sigma to reduce fallout and increase inputs. We're applying the same thinking here, and customers are too. They want to get the job done quickly, predictably, and with a great result. So when we go talk to customers, we're going to focus on defining the job through their eyes, like a surgeon would say, remove an anatomical structure surgically. We're going to define the steps that they're trying to go through as they go about and get the job done. Again, this isn't what they're doing, it's what they're trying to do. They're trying to establish initial access. How do they do that? Well, that's in solution space. We don't want to know that. We just want to know what they're trying to do. They're trying to gain visual access to the target structure. They're trying to define the pathway to the structure. They're trying to navigate through barriers to that structure. How? We don't care how at this point, right? We just want to know what they're trying to do, not what they're doing. They're trying to terminate the blood supply to the target structure, mobilize the structure from unexpected attachments, right? So you get the feel there. But what I want you to look at and take notice of are those statements below those boxes, like statement number 25. Minimize the time it takes to locate the vessels that are feeding the target structure. This is what we call a need statement or desired outcome. This is the foundation behind outcome-driven innovation. These are instructions that are coming from the surgeon that's describing how to get the job done faster. They want to minimize the time it takes to locate the vessels that are feeding the target structure. Number 28, minimize the likelihood that bleeding occurs when terminating the blood supply to the structure. That's an instruction from the surgeon describing how they want to get the job done more predictably. And you can read through all of these. Minimize the likelihood of compromising a sample of the target structure that's intended for analysis. This is getting a great result, right? And you can look through all of these. They're all solution independent. They're not describing a feature. They're not describing a pain, a gain, exciter, delighter, a value driver. They are simply describing what the customer is trying to achieve and avoid in order to get the job done better and or more cheaply. There's typically between 75 and 150 of these statements for any given market. And so it's not insignificant that there's lots of needs that are required to be addressed in most markets in order for a product to be successful. The outcome statements have a very specific grammatical structure, format. This is the result of a lot of work we've done over the 30 years, testing these, putting them into the field to quantify them with customers, which I'll cover in a minute, using them in ideation sessions, using them to help drive value proposition development, using them to help drive M&A investment activity, R&D investment activity, digitalization projects, a whole variety of downstream things that we'll cover as well. But there's a lot of pressure on getting these statements right. And again, this is the key input into the process. And understanding how to collect these outcomes and how to quantify them and how to use them to guide your ideation efforts will be your key to success. So what you have here are these 100+ timeless statements that instruct your company how to create value over the long term. Again, these statements don't change over time. I can go back here, minimize the time it takes to move an adjacent structure out of the visual field. Was that a need last year? Was that a need 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago? Will it be a need next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? The answer is yes. People are trying to minimize the time it takes to move an adjacent structure out of the visual field. They've been trying to do that as they remove structures surgically since they've been executing that job. And having this insight simplifies the innovation process. Now, what's going to change over time are the solutions that come about to address these needs, and it will change which needs are most important and at least satisfied. But this need set becomes your foundation to work from and guide your actions for years to come. Now comes the fun part. Now we have to figure out, now that we know these needs, which ones are unmet? Now, what do we mean by unmet? In solution space, unmet needs are features, exciters, delighters that are missing from the solution. We often see the Kano model that's used to talk about the must-haves, the exciters, the delighters. That's solution space speak. Those are features, right? We're going to flip this around so that we're saying an unmet need are the measurable outcomes that people struggle to achieve. And we're going to discover which of those needs are they're struggling to achieve through data collection. We're going to ask them. We're going to ask 180 to 1,000 customers to tell us, how important is it to you that you minimize the likelihood of damaging blood vessels along the pathway? And given the solutions you're using today, how satisfied are you with your ability to minimize the likelihood of damaging blood vessels along the pathway? Now, with these two data points, we can start calculating and plotting out where the customer is under and overserved. So let's just take this one outcome. So this dot on this graphic here, which shows importance, satisfaction, this one dot is showing us that 81% of the population said this outcome was very or extremely important. Yet only 30% of the population is saying it's very or extremely satisfied. Now, that gives us an opportunity score of 13.2, and the formula we use is up here. And the thinking behind the formula is quite simple. It's that if a need, an outcome, is very important, and the difference between the importance and satisfaction is great, we're going to call that an unmet need. So it's important, and there's a big gap between importance and satisfaction. And that's how we use the formula. Now, what we're able to do is plot out those 100 different need statements, figure out pretty quickly where the market's underserved. So these are your unmet needs. This is where you'd want to focus to get the job done significantly better for your customer. What we also find here is where the market's overserved. This is where you may have overinvested in a product, like putting a 6 blade on a razor blade, for example. Maybe 5 was enough. Maybe 3 was enough. Let's not keep adding cost and not gaining additional customer satisfaction. After all, the goal of innovation is not only to get the job done better, but to get the job done more cheaply as well. And if you can come up with a solution in any market that gets the job done better and more cheaply, you will win market share in that market. And that's because you're satisfying the underserved people, the overserved people, really the entire population of users in that market. So the benefit of this is the innovators now know which of these 100 outcomes are unmet and to what degree. So now we have a priority order for all these, which takes us to segmentation. Segmentation is interesting. I think we all know that people don't agree on which needs are unmet. And there are segments of people with different unmet needs. But traditionally, segments are defined around personas, use cases, people with different demographics, attitudes, behaviors. These are all proxies for people that have different unmet needs. In other words, people don't segment around unmet needs because they don't agree on what a need is, what the needs are, and which needs are unmet. So they can't. So what they do instead is they segment around data that they have as a proxy for segmenting around needs. What we say is, let's not do that, right? Instead of segmenting around a proxy for needs, why don't we just segment around the unmet needs? Because we know what a need is, we've defined it. We know what the needs are because we've collected them. We know which needs are unmet because we've calculated that. So we have data that most organizations wouldn't have in a process that's been designed specifically to inform us along this dimension. So as we say, traditional methods are ineffective. Yes, customers don't agree on which needs are unmet, but why use a proxy, right? The best way to segment to find unmet the best way to find segments of people with unmet needs is just to segment around unmet needs. Again, very simple, logical thinking. Now, the way we do it is we take the needs that are unmet and we look to see where are the differences? Maybe a third of the sample thinks outcomes 10, 20, and 30 are really important and unsatisfied. Maybe a third of the population thinks outcomes 40, 15, 60 are really important and unsatisfied. Another third thinks 3 other needs are important and unsatisfied. Well, through factor and cluster analysis, we can put people into segments based on the way they answered those questions. So they're in these segments because they have different unmet needs. And we know that. What we don't know yet is who are they and why do they have these different unmet needs, which is the final step. Once we put them in the segments, we go back to look at them to figure out who they are. What is causing them to have these unmet needs? What circumstance were they in when they were getting the job done that caused them to struggle in that unique way? So now we can come up with solutions that will address the needs of people in different segments if we choose to target those different segments. But it's very rare that a one-size-fits-all strategy would appeal to anyone in the market, right? So this is really important. This example came from work that we did with a dental supply company studying dentists who filled a cavity. And in talking to the dentists, we found that in 19% of the cases, they were overserved with the products that they were using. And this happened to be when the patients had healthy gums and required just a small filling. On the other side of the equation, we found that there were 24% of the occasions where they really struggled to get the job done. And this is when they were focused on patients that had unhealthy gums and required a large filling. What would happen here is the patients would tend to bleed more. It would impact visualization, make it harder to see what was going on. It'd make it harder to keep the area dry as they're trying to contour this larger filling. So in that situation, they're struggling more to get the job done. 3 different segments, 3 different products, has 3 different strategies that would be required to win this market 100%. This Over here in the blue, this requires a disruptive strategy. Let's get the job done cheaper, maybe not as well. Over on the far right, this requires a differentiated strategy. Let's get the job done a lot better, but maybe charge more. And then for the middle segment, they're almost satisfied with everything, but there are few opportunities you can see here. So let's pursue a sustaining strategy with our current products to address that 57% of the market, right? That's a roadmap to success, right? To cover 100% of the market, if that's what you choose to do. You can choose to totally ignore one or more of those segments if you wish, but at least this paints a picture of how to win in the marketplace. This is offering you authentic, distinctive, actionable segments that you can discover only if you segment around unmet needs, not a proxy, right? Again, the reason companies don't do that is because they don't have the data. They don't agree on what a need is. You know, this is the cause of all this issue. All right, so now we have a good knowledge of our market, customers' needs, which are unmet, and if there's segments of people with different unmet needs. Right, now we can really have some fun. We can go create solutions that are going to get the job done a lot better. As we go about and do this, the first thing we do is create what I call the innovation strategy. I'm trying to make sense of two words that make no sense individually, never mind together. But let's give it a shot. We call an innovation strategy the selection of the segments and the outcomes that you want to target to put you on the most efficient path to growth. So what we have here, what I mean by this is you're trying to come up with the outcomes that you want to go address that will have the greatest impact on the largest customer population. So it would make sense that if there was an unmet need, let's say there's a 3-segment solution that we looked at. If that need is unmet across all 3 segments, addressing these high leverage opportunities, as we call them, would impact 100% of the market positively, right? This is where you'd want to focus. If you would have satisfied these 3 unmet needs, you would have a positive impact on 100% of the market. If you would have satisfied these 2 needs, you'd have an impact on some smaller percentage, maybe 50 or 60%. Same thing here, segments 2 and 3. And if you wanted to just focus on a segment that was an outcome that was specific to one segment, you could do that as well. From here, you could say, do I want to build a product for each segment? Which you often do if you have a product portfolio. But in other cases, if you're building software products, there's usually only one software product, and you would actually prioritize the needs in the order in which you see them right here. We're trying to figure out what features should we add to get the job done for the biggest population, right? So let's say we had 30 opportunities that we've identified here. This is going to be transformed into a number of innovation initiatives, if you will. It's not as if all those needs could be satisfied with products. There's many things that can happen here. So for example, you may already satisfy 3 of those unmet needs, and you could better position the product you already have. Just talk about it differently. We have examples with Arm & Hammer's Animal Nutrition Group. We have examples with Coloplast wound care products where they gained additional growth just by repositioning the products they already had, talking about what their product did better than competing solutions. That's one option. And that's great to do because that's something you can achieve in the short term with little cost. Then you can improve your existing products, or maybe add services to your products. Maybe there's brand new products that you need, and maybe brand new services that you need to invest in. Or maybe you need to make AI or R&D and M&A investments to address those needs. But all this becomes part of your roadmap in terms of how you're going to get the capabilities, use those capabilities to create value for customers along these 30 different dimensions, right? Ultimately, getting the job done perfectly. Now, this may take you years, may take you decades, which is fine, right? But again, it's pointing to the North Star, which is to say, let's pick a market that we're in, helping customers get a job done, with our ultimate goal of helping get it done perfectly. The beauty of this too is you can measure your progress along the way. You can look at today's solution to see how well they're satisfying the unmet needs. And as you create the next product, you can see from customers asking them, how far did we move the needle? Where's our level of satisfaction? And you can see that it's increasing in certain dimensions and maybe decreasing in others. So here, whereas this may have been somewhat of an opportunity, now it's more of an opportunity. It's the least satisfied outcome. So maybe in the next iteration, you have to figure out, well, how do we satisfy that need without unsatisfying some others as well? We want to make the right trade-off decisions as we go through this process year after year to eventually figure out how to get the job done perfectly. Many companies like starting by formulating the product strategy. Let's come up with the product, right? Like I promised up front, right? What we want to do is to define the features that the organization can develop to address the unmet needs that we identified in the market. What we typically do, once we know, let's say there's, like with the Bosch example, there were 14 unmet needs. We go talk to customers about those 14 unmet needs and get more information about them. Why are they struggling along those dimensions? What's the root cause? What's the workaround? And we take that information, work with the engineers, scientists, material experts, people responsible for idea generation, devise concepts that will address each need, evaluate them to figure out which ones will satisfy the outcome to the greatest degree for the least product cost, for the least development effort, for the least technical risk, and for value and sustainability over time. And what we do is we agree on the optimal solution. This actually becomes the easy part of the process. For example, when the Bosch team had the data presented to them, it took them just 3 hours to conceptualize that circular saw. And as they said, well, it's not as if we hadn't had these ideas before. The problem is we've had thousands of ideas before. We didn't know it was this combination of 14 ideas that would lead to this winning product. So that's how it's done. Let's look at the job the customer's trying to get done, break it down to its component parts at a very granular level that's actionable. Let's figure out which of those needs are unmet and if there's a segment that we should target in order to win in the marketplace. Let's look at those features and see if they can be satisfied using a specific technology. Let's look at the outcomes and see if they can be addressed with specific features and technologies. And let's put a feature set together that will address those unmet needs very effectively, getting the job done 15% better or more. All right, this is it. This is how you conceptualize solutions you know will win in the market before development begins. Right? It requires a little discipline, requires you to think differently, requires research, it requires you to align the team around a different way to think as well. And I love this quote here because I really spent a lot of time talking about the science behind this. This comes from Clive Meanwell, the former CEO of the medicines company, which was acquired by Novartis about 2 years ago at a 41% premium. And we had worked with them for about 5 years or so. They were an outcome-driven company. And he credited a lot of their valuation to being an innovative company. And what he said is the process, besides the science and everything I told you about, what he liked about it is it brought competence, transparency, alignment, and mutual trust to teams who were used to operating in silos. There's more about, instead of nobody agrees on what a need is, let's get everyone to agree on what a need is, what the needs are, which needs are unmet, if there's segments of people with different unmet needs, and now let's debate what is the best solution. That's where we want to spend our time, arguing, debating, right? Let's come up with the best solution. And with all the creative minds in the company, they consistently came up with great solutions. Again, here's the process. We got the theory, all the steps in the process that get broken out to these stages, allow us to formulate the strategy, deploy it through marketing, development, and R&D. What I want to offer here too is a free copy of the book on the right. The one on the left I have no control over. That's from McGraw-Hill. You have to pay for that one. That's older. The one on the right from 2016 is in ebook format and audiobook format. and will help take you to the next level of understanding of the process. And another option is to become a member of ODI Pro. It's our innovation strategy platform at strategyn.com/ODI Pro, which has all our latest training materials, certifications, tools, access to ODI experts, monthly private events, community, and so on. So with that, Brian, I think I want to turn it back to you and see if we have a few minutes for questions. So we should probably take that opportunity, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm glad we got some time for Q&A. So feel free to unmute or put something in the chat if you'd like to just write it out and I can moderate. Does anybody have any questions for Tony? Luciano wanted to know about modifying or adapting for startup versus, corporate innovation. I'll let you take that one, Tony.
Sure. It's the same process, but you don't have a lot of budget, right? So don't spend a lot. You don't have to. As a startup, if you can get your hands on 1 or 2 customers that will spend, let's say, 10 hours with you, that you could do immersion sessions with and take them through this process. Understand from them, what is the job they're trying to get done? Understand from them, what are their outcomes? And even get them to prioritize their needs. Maybe it's just 2 people, maybe it's 6 people, maybe it's 30 people, maybe it's some of your friends, but you get enough people to prioritize where you can get the data to prioritize those needs and give you insights that you wouldn't have otherwise. Now, a large company probably wouldn't opt for that. They're making multi-million-dollar bets. They're opting for a more complete approach. They would want many interviews done qualitatively to make sure they have a complete set of outcomes. They want that validated with people around the globe to make sure this data set, the outcome set is valid across all geographies. They'd probably want to quantify the importance of satisfaction across multiple geographies and different use cases and a whole variety of things. Work we did for Twitter at one point, it was 14,000 interviews so they could cut data all different ways. But you don't need that many. If you have 30 interviews or 60 interviews, you're on the right track, right? You're separating what's important, unsatisfied, from what's unimportant, very satisfied. So that's the way to do it. And of course, what I described in ODI Pro will give you a jump start on how to execute the process effectively on your own.
Hey, great stuff. I'm glad you talked through that, because I was going to say very similar. We've been teaching the same things that Tony's been talking about here, as far as 10 to 20 interviews is usually plenty for you startups, right? We want to use the jobs to be done. And Edward just asked about paid interviews for startups. I'll let you take that one as well. He's basically asking, is it okay to pay them to collect that data?
Yeah, we always pay. It's best to pay. In fact, when we do immersion sessions, which I like to do, what I mean by that is get to pay the same 3, 4, 5 people to sit with you for 10 hours over 2 weeks, 2-hour increments, and go through the exercise and build out that hierarchy, define the job app, define all the outcomes, right? Do it in a collaborative manner. So at the end, you've got that masterpiece of you put the puzzle together that describes the entire job the customer's trying to get done. Then you can go quantify it with 10, 20, 30 people, whatever you can get. You can pay them too. We often do. It's best if you do. If you use a third-party company, they'll do it blind so that the participant won't know who's putting the survey out there, which can be helpful in some cases. And then you have your data. That's it.
Thank you. Jonathan has his hand up.
Yes, hello. Hi, Tony. Thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting to view this from this lens. So thank you about that. I have a question related to, you do all of this before development. What happens when you start development? How the feedback from the product itself and the solution itself fits into this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, what if you already started development, which is 90% of the time? right? So we come across that, like I said, 90% of the time. Uh, let's say you've got your initial product out there, doesn't mean it's going to win, right? You're testing your minimum viable product. Still, go do exactly what I described. Uh, maybe you lucked upon something. Maybe there's some features on your product that are addressing some of the most unmet needs in the market. And we do studies like this all the time as well, where you say, I have a product that has these features on it. You could reverse engineer the features and say, what outcomes do they help people achieve? And put those outcomes in a survey and say, are any of these outcomes important and unsatisfied? And if the answer is no for all of them, you're in tough shape. But if the answer is yes for a few of them, you can position your product around those unmet needs. And now you've best positioned what you have around the unmet needs that you've somehow managed to address. But you should still go back and do the entire process and understand where you need to go next, right? That will help you. What I described will help you make the best out of what you already did, but it won't point to opportunities beyond what you already did.
Great. Thank you, Tony.
Sure.
Thank you for the questions. I know we only have 2 minutes left. I don't see any more. So I'm going to, before I have us all say thank you to Tony, a couple of quick announcements. One, I want to say thank you for some great guests that we have actually on here. I don't know, Tony might not have seen, but Sharon Tall, who some of you were here when she did her about a month ago, Where to Play. So Sharon has been listening in, Tony, to you. And for those of you who were here and listened to Sharon, wonderful. Next week, I will be doing a culture talk again on the culture design canvas and culture map. And Tony touched on these things that I'll be talking about, which talk about innovation and strategy. Everything points back to where you are going as a company. What's your purpose and vision? Because if you don't have that Northern Star that Tony talked about, every shiny bauble looks like a great opportunity and you're going to go in 50 directions. So how do you evaluate innovation, right? So we're going to start with that. The canvases that we've been talking about, whether it's Alex's, business model canvas or Ash's lean canvas, all these jobs to be done, we've been learning about that. So you've now heard from the master, Tony, on how you can actually get much deeper into jobs to be done, right? We've been talking about this for years. So we wanted to give you that opportunity. The book is in the link. The link to the book is in the chat that Arlene has put in there. So you can get that book from Tony for free. Hopefully you come back to us. We can, maybe ask Tony some more questions. He put his LinkedIn up there for you and the URL to Strategyn. I really recommend you reach out and take Strategyn classes as well. So, Tony, any last comments from you before we say thank you?
No, I really appreciate pulling the audience together, and I hope this time was well spent and that helps you become better innovators. I appreciate you taking your time.
It absolutely does make us better innovators, and we appreciate your time and effort. And you can all do the Zoom, emojis, hand claps, wave, or unmute and say thank you. So I want to say a big warm welcome, warm thank you to Tony. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll hopefully see most of you next week, and good luck, and go out there and uncover those jobs to get done.
There you go.
Take care, everybody.